Welcome, everyone. You're in the right place to see Saving Time with IMAGINiT Clarity for Revit with your presenter, Joe Eichenseer. Joe, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenna, and thanks everybody for taking some time out of your day to join us. As you know, the title says, we're here to talk about what can we do, how does, and what's it going to actually look like, feel like, if we're engaging with this Clarity software to try and save some time out of your day and return it back so you can be free to do some other things and what those other types of things can be. We're trying to dive it into all that mess. And if you haven't heard really much about what this Clarity software is, what it does, what it comes around for, it's a piece of software that we've been developing for quite some time with the intent of what can we do to make a BIM manager's life better, a model manager, anybody that deals with any aspect of Revit type of data. Because as we're looking at it, there's a whole bunch of things that end up impacting our daily lives. There's constant distractions that are facing us, just basically somebody coming in and saying, hey, can you, whatever might be the next thing. And there's been some crazy studies about how much time it actually takes us to get back and truly into whatever it was we were doing after a distraction comes around. It varies per person, sure. But anything up to like half an hour for you to get back into it or more based off of what the nature of that distraction was. So it's not just the time that you're away, it's that extra time, half hour, hour, whatever, before you're really into that zone again. Maybe you are tasked with leading the direction of what's happening with this Revit and BIM, but you don't have time. There's all these things coming around that are just preventing you from being able to do the things that might be part of your job or shared responsibilities within the company. It's just with the busyness that we've got these days, it's really hard to find time to get things done. And so with that idea is we want to be able to turn around and say, well, how can we use this Clarity software to do some different things to save that time, to return this back to you? If you had an invisible robot sitting off in the corner, a Revit robot, doing things, creating PDFs, creating DWG files for you, sending and receiving files, doing cleanup. A lot of these really important but somewhat menial types of tasks. If you could have that system doing these types of things for you, what would it mean for your day? There was a conversation I was in recently with a client of ours who had the comment that moving to Clarity returned their Fridays back to them. So that just this collection of things here and other items that you'll be seeing as we're going along, all these different elements of what they were doing on a day-to-day basis just killed a good portion of every single Friday and a decent-sized project they were working on. So by having this system in place to help automate different types of tasks, to be able to capture insights or knowledge about what's happening with certain files, to be able to do different types of reporting of information about your Revit projects, to have this system be able to do those types of things for you frees up that time so that you can then turn around and focus on being an architect, focus on being an engineer, a designer, an intern, whatever it is that your role happens to be, the things that you actually are meant to be doing for the company, not watching these progress bars go along, and get those Fridays back to you. So if we're looking at these things, the Clarity interface, the Clarity software is something that sits on your server. It's not a software as a service. It's not sitting in the cloud. We can work with cloud data, but it's sitting in your office and saying, well, let's go do these things for you. And there's a whole crazy list of different types of things that Clarity can do for you, whether we're talking about some of those printing, exporting tasks that we've got on the left-hand side, if we're talking about data-related or different types of exchange or management tasks we've got on the right-hand side. There's just a ton of things. A little bit later on, we'll have a slide of what are the actual top 10 tasks that people use on just the whole gambit of things. We've been able to collect some information that our clients have been able to provide us over how Clarity is being used. And of all of those things, what are the things that people are doing most often? As you might expect, PDF printing is way up at the top of the list. But there's a lot of things we can do depending on what you need to do. You're not going to use every single aspect of Clarity because there's even a page 2 of tasks of what we can do inside here. But with all the things that Clarity can do from a task automation standpoint, not even getting into the data or analytics end, there's just a place where we can go and find what's important. Do you use BIM 360 Glue? If so, we can automate the process of publishing your models up to that Glue site. Are you required to send the glue model up once a week, twice a week, every day? How often are you required to do that? If you had this system be able to do that for you and you just put it out of your mind, it may not be a whole lot of time out of your day, but there's a stress level that just starts to ease off if you just know that every day at 10 o'clock in the evening, the Clarity system is going to wake up and generate a bunch of PDFs for you. It's going to upload your model to BIM 360 Glue. It's going to take things and publish it from BIM 360 to the public side website so that other people can see things and start going through markups. All sorts of possibilities that just aren't for you to be doing anymore. And something of a repeated theme, get your Fridays back. How much more could you do to add value to a project, a building, to your company if you had your Fridays back in your life again? That's the types of things that we're looking at through here. And it's not just those people that are interacting with Revit on a weekly or even daily basis. It goes back to people that are non-Revit users as well, because we can have these different tasks scheduled to run at prescribed times every day of the week, certain days of the week, certain days of the month, whatever it needs to be. Or that same non-Revit user can come into your Clarity intranet portal and say, hey, go do this for me. Go to something that looks like what you've got on the right-hand side and say, generate my PDFs, please. Or even if you needed to and you had it set it up for it, print to paper. And by doing that, you'll have this project manager, project engineer, project architect, whomever, that can now be a little bit more self-sufficient and get things done for themselves so that they're not interrupting people to get something done and then turn around and wait for that half an hour, hour's worth of time before you really back into whatever it was you were doing before that distraction came around. Now, for what it's worth, excuse me, that image on the right-hand side is actually a screen cap. You can see it in the top left corner from an iPad. Because this is run off of a intranet site sitting on your server in your office, so long as you've got a device with a web browser that has access to the server, so maybe you have to activate a VPN, maybe you've got things you need to do from an IT standpoint to provide that access, you can be doing any of these things from any one of those devices anywhere with that internet connection. So that same person can say, hey, I know I need to have a new set of PDFs that's going to be sitting in the office when I get back from this meeting. So activate a VPN, click on the button that says generate PDFs. By the time you get back into the office, PDF set is sitting there waiting for you. You don't have to wait for things to happen. You've now got that time returned back into your life because it's this robot, this Revit robot hanging out in the corner took care of those things for you. So that's just from a task automation basis. It's the easiest place for us to talk about returning time back into your life. But it's not the only place. Some of these get a little bit more fuzzy. So when we're talking about, for example, data, model metrics, one of the things that we can have this Clarity system do for you is to be able to scan your models, to be able to look for points of information, points of data that we want to be able to collect and track over time. Now, Clarity is actually capturing somewhere along the lines of 60, I believe currently 60 different pieces, maybe 63 different pieces of data from your Revit files. They could be things from file open time to how many in-place families do you have, what types of warnings do you have, how many dimension styles do you have, open and sync to central times, all these different types of things you've got through here. And whether we're talking about different dashboards of just color coding things to say red, green, yellow, is it good, bad, or in a warning territory. Be able to see something like the time graph. We've got the little mountain diagram in the middle of the screen there of how has, in this case, the file size been increasing or decreasing over time. Every time you're seeing something drop off, chances are somebody did a purge or some other aspect of model maintenance on that particular file. Different scatter graphs and diagrams to be able to show you what's going on so that you're not going to care about all 60-plus different things that we've got out there. But for those that do matter to you, we can set up different types of warnings or charts, whether it's on a project-by-project basis or looking at things across the entire corporate library of elements that you've got to be able to say, am I trending in a positive direction? Am I trending in a negative direction? And as a model manager, as a BIM manager, whatever title you want to throw out there, there's a value, there's a time savings that come around to be able to see just at a glance where am I going, where are my projects going, so that if something is trending in a negative direction, we can turn around and address it immediately as opposed to after it completely blows up and now we've got some real issues to deal with. And when we're talking about time savings at that point, it goes back to the idea of how much time do you save in a project by not having a problem? And that's a tricky question to ask or answer. Easy question to ask. But as we're looking at that, and I'm looking at the sample file here, you know, the number of imports, warnings, and views not on sheets, number of line styles and line patterns for that architecture model across the top are all in this red area. How many of those are really, truly important to me? Maybe number of warnings getting in that red area. Yeah, hey, let's take some time, sit down with the project team and dig through these warnings a little bit, because if we're getting into that red territory, we're getting into the number of warnings that have been defined by you as saying, for us, for our firm, the types of projects we work on, this is the danger territory. And so let's be wary about that and start taking care of things. And so does that save you half an hour of time that you normally would have taken to dig through a Revit file on your own and have this do it every single day for you? There's a half hour a day back in your life. Well, you can't realistically spend a half hour a day doing all these things, so maybe it's half hour a week. So, okay, time back in your life, saving time gets back to a half hour a week, but if you do run it every day, it's just that much more valuable to you, because now you've got a Clarity system that's not only saving you time, but it's accomplishing things for you that you'd never be able to get to on your own anyway. So lots of different types of things we can go through here to be able to identify. And with these, is it going to actively send you alerts as you cross different thresholds on these different types of warnings or metrics or whatever? Or is it going to be a little bit more of a reactive, passive mode where it's saying, come look at this page to be able to see where things are at? Both sides are possible. It's just a matter of how's it going. Now, there's one other place where Clarity can look to save a lot of time for you, and that's more of a data and reporting. Doesn't hit everybody, but one of the things we can do from a Clarity standpoint is to be able to take data from your Revit file and pull it into a database, a SQL database. Once the information's in that Microsoft SQL database, we can start reporting on it in different ways by giving you graphs, diagrams, tables, just like schedules, similar at least to schedules or spreadsheets of information about your particular file. Color code things accordingly, get into data sheets about objects so you can give a snapshot of a room. Here's all the things that ought to be in the room. Data sheets about areas, furniture, fixture, equipment, all sorts of different things that can come around. Not everybody needs these, but if you do create data sheets, I know I did prior to my time with IMAGINiT, did healthcare centers, Native American healthcare centers, and it would take up a better part of a week every time we needed to go through and create or update these different types of data sheets. And it is just a grind to get through. Now, with the Clarity side, it's just a matter of, here's my template of how I want things to look, do my data extraction, ta-da, my data sheets are done. It's an incredible time savings if that's something that you go into. If it's not something that you get into, forget about it. Don't worry about it. Let's focus on the other things that tend to matter a little bit more. So with that being said, there's my intro. There's the wonderful world of PowerPoint to get us into just an overview of where is this at? What types of things can we look at for time savings? I want to take a little bit, go into an actual demo of this, and then when we come back out, we'll take a look at what were those top 10 tasks that people are actively using in Clarity today. Our real live clients doing real live Clarity work, what are they getting into? How do we go across saving time? Our message for the advertisement or getting information out about this particular webcast was saying, what if we could save you 10 hours a month? And that's a really low bar for us to cross, but what will it look like? So let's switch over. I'm going to get into the wonderful world of, in this case, Google Chrome. It can be, again, whatever modern browser you want to. And I'm looking at my Clarity server. When you log on, you'll see a list of cards here for all the different projects that you might have set up or somebody has set up inside the Clarity world. And really what it comes down to is setting up a project in Clarity is a matter of saying, where are your Revit files for that particular job? And then Clarity from that point starts tracking and monitoring them. This example project that we're looking at here is files that are sitting on a file server. This health clinic project is one that happens to be looking at the Autodesk Cloud, the BIM 360 world. So we've got that. If you needed to, getting data into Revit Server, all sorts of possibilities of what you could get into, just a matter of, well, let's start looking at things. If I go into my example project and just the idea of how do I do things, how do I run a task, how do we do whatever, it's just as simple as going through and saying, hey, here's the list of all the tasks that I've been given access to on this project. We set them up, and if I need to create new PDFs, I'll go to that PDF task, hit the run button, and that task has started. If you look down on the taskbar of my computer here, none of these buttons or icons represent Revit. You will not see Revit pop up on my screen because my computer's not doing anything. The Clarity system is doing things. For example, if I come over here to my tasks area, what we'll see is that for each of the files in this project, there's 4 of them in here, the Clarity system has said, great, based off of the details of this task for generating PDFs, I'm going to open up each one of these files, print out the sheets that you specified, place those PDF files in a folder that was specified, then shut down and wait for something else to happen. And all of that's happening on this other machine. So I'm free to do whatever it is I need to. This whole idea of returning time back into my life, well, that means that as this this other system is launching Revit, doing all these things, I'm doing other design work in Revit, working through other communication. I'm going to lunch. I'm going home at the end of the day. I'm working through different aspects of coordination and design, engineering, whatever it is inside the building that is more than just watching the progress bars move along. So pretty soon here, what will end up happening is the status of any particular task will move from new to it's going to be claimed by the server. What's happening in the background is it is launching a copy of Revit. It is opening up that file. So all this time, I mean, we're watching this like you're watching the old pen plotters of just, ooh, that's cool. But we're just waiting for this to be able to move on so we can see that it is hidden to that next spot. And while we're waiting for that, if I head over to this area for setting up the tasks, this is a place where we can get to all those different things that we had set up. Some of these tasks are set to run at certain times of the day. This is based off a 24-hour clock, so these 1400 ones are tasks that are happening at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a scheduled basis. If I look at my new task list over here, this is a very similar list to what we saw in a couple of different slides before of all the different types of things I can do. Now, one of the items I haven't really talked about is the idea of Dynamo. Clarity can automate your Dynamo scripts. So if you've got a Dynamo script, a Dynamo graph, however you choose to name it, you have to create it, but once it's created, you can put it in a folder that Clarity says, great, here's a Dynamo DYN file. I'm going to automate running that Dynamo script across however many different Revit files you need to. So suddenly, the idea of what types of things can Clarity do, what types of things can Clarity automate, becomes virtually unlimited because all of these different types of things we have here can be extended by the use of Dynamo. Now, if you don't know Dynamo, want to learn it, hey, we can have that conversation separately and start teaching, working you through what is Dynamo, how does it work. But the rest of these are all different things that we can do. So if we look back and take that get my Fridays back type of example, and we'll see this broken down a few different ways, what are the types of things, and this is a little bit of a hypothetical question for you, but what are the types of things that you do that are administratively related to Revit, and on a kind of on a weekly basis, maybe not every day, but on a pretty regular basis. On a pretty regular basis, you're generating PDFs. It's the nature of our business. You generate PDFs. On a pretty regular basis, maybe weekly, maybe not weekly, you'll probably generate DWG files. If you're a Revit house, well, you need to send DWG files out to the people that are doing civil work for you. Might be some specialty contractors out there. There's all sorts of things. On a regular basis, you're probably sending and receiving files. So we've got a couple of tasks here of publish a Revit file, in which we'll publish a file and send it out to somebody using any number of different types of services that are out there. We've got an update Revit file from disk or FTP site when you need to claim a file that's being sent to you from somebody outside of your company. That happens on a regular basis. So even just those limited things there, maybe publishing Navisworks files or sending things to BIM 360 Glue if you needed to do that for coordination. If you're thinking about those and you do some aspect of those types of tasks, how much time do you spend doing those on any given representative week out there? And what we're talking to some of our clients that are on the, what we'll say maybe mid-size and larger projects, that's as much as half of a day on any given week, maybe spread out through the week, maybe all lumped onto a Friday, but half of a day spent doing these different types of activities. It'll vary, sure, but it starts to add up. And if we can take that time and return it back to you, let you design, let you engineer more, what's that value give back to you, to your firm, to yourself as you're going through all of this? So those are all the different types of things there. If I look at my current tasks, guess what? They're already done. So if I want to see where are those PDFs, what do they look like, just so happens that this particular task, if I go look at, we'll say, the architecture file, click on this view button to go see some details, all those PDFs are sitting on my Clarity server, and it generated all of these as individual PDFs. We can have it as a multi-sheet PDF, whatever, but now I've got all of my data here, and these are all updated as of right now. This Audubon Architecture Central should be my multi-sheet PDF version. No, it's just one sheet. But it's all the data is here. If I needed to, I can go full screen to be able to see what's going on. At this point, what do? Well, it's a PDF. You print it, you download it, you send it to somebody else. You could have Clarity as part of that task, finish things up, and then upload the new PDF set to BIM 360, to Box or Dropbox. Take the files, put them into a folder that's being monitored by Newforma, and let Newforma say, oh, here's new files. I'm going to package these up into a transmittal and send them off. Whatever it needs to be, we can have this system, this invisible Revit robot hanging out there, do all these different things for us. All the other files that we've had Clarity create for me on this server, I happen to have them sitting off on some different folders on this server too. Could be on your file server, could be on your intranet portal, wherever you wanted them to be. I can look at different reports of how is my file performing. Are there places where, based off of an Autodesk programming interface, set of rules, are there things that my file has in place that are potentially negatively impacting performance? That's these performance advisors. If I look at the one created just earlier this month, there's a few different rules through here where some of these match up with warnings, some of them don't. But telling me what's going on with my file and is there an opportunity for me to streamline things? What's the Revit ID number of that object that violates that check that we've got in place? Yeah, there's a couple of families in here that need a little bit of looking. They might not have been modeled appropriately because we've got disjoined solids. And that seems a little bit odd. Overlapping elements. There's all sorts of things that we can start taking a look at to understand how can my file be better. So not only am I returning time, saving time by having this Clarity system check things for me, produce things for me, but it's also giving me feedback so that I can improve my Revit file so it performs better. And now I'm saving time because Revit's just behaving faster than it was prior to going through all these different checks. What's the value in not having Revit crash on you? What sort of time does that save you? It depends on your firm, depends on what types of things you're running into. You need to be able to think about these things relative to your office. We'll get a representative sample coming up here in just a little bit, but there's some things here for us to be able to look through. If I want to be able to see, well, what about those metrics, those red, green, yellow dots? There's a series of rules that we can build out that are relative to your firm. So what's important to you? In this case, we've got about half a dozen different elements through here, and most of them are fine. In fact, the structure file is completely fine. I wouldn't be worried about this one at all. MEP file only has one red dot, and that's with the number of views not on sheets. I'm probably not too worried about that, but it's sitting there. The architecture file has 357 views not on sheets. That seems maybe a little excessive because I'll tell you right now it's a small Revit file. It's like 30, 40 megs, 45 megs maybe, small. A number of in-place families, 70 in-place families on that small Revit file. That's probably an opportunity for a lunch and learn topic for the firm so that we can understand why is it maybe not good to create an in-place family and copy it 70 times through a building, and give us that learning opportunity. And then from that learning opportunity, saving time because people are operating and working more efficiently than they would have before. The Revit file starts behaving more nimbly than it would have before. Can track how any of these items are changing over time. And if we need to, start pulling up a little graph here for the most important ones that you've got. How are they changing? Are they moving up? Are they moving down? So my file size is ever so slightly increasing. If we look at my file open time, grab that from this list, hit the view button, and see, well, file open time, something happened here in middle of March where we did something to allow the file to open up in 5-6 seconds instead of, we'll say, 10 or 11 seconds. So a little bit of model maintenance. Somewhere back in early March, there's a blip. Maybe somebody tried to open up the file across a VPN connection. Who knows what happened? However, there's a one-time blip. Everything else has been 10 seconds or less, and now recently 6 seconds or less. So we've got an idea of how things are going, and we'll be able to see that history of how is this working. We'll be able to see what individual people have been opening up this file on what computers, and be able to identify, is there maybe a Windows profile that's too busy or corrupted? Maybe there's a computer that somebody's complaining about their computer being slow. Get some empirical data to be able to say, are you really running slow? Or relative to everybody else in the firm, you've got the performance we would expect. We need to reset some expectations. What are all those things looking like so we can capture that data and understand it, whether we're looking at an individual file, or if I come up to the overall metrics here, we're looking at all of your projects. Everything with this kind of pink background is one that there's a file in here that has at least one red dot in it. This Block C project is a place where we have at least one yellow dot, no red dots, probably a bunch of green dots. So if I look at my health clinic, it's a different file. This is that BIM 360 project. I've got 2 with a red dot. I'll be able to see what those types of things are and be able to understand that just at a glance. How healthy is my project portfolio of Revit projects that we're monitoring with Clarity? Looking at it here, I'll tell you one thing is we've got some unrealistic metrics set, but looking at this really quickly, I'll be able to see, geez, we've got some work ahead of us to be able to try and get at least half of those red projects to at least a yellow status, get something a little bit better, and be able to look at all of these different items of how are things trending over time, like I said, not just from a single file, but how is it, trending from an overall company-wide standpoint. So if I look at that same file open time, everything green here is where the file open time is reducing over time. The red graphs are where it's increasing over time. So where and how are my projects trending? All this information sitting inside that SQL database for us to be able to use and work with in any number of ways that you want to. Those are all configurable by yourself. So we'll go through and set up the different standards that are appropriate for you. So, what's a typical file size for you? For the firm down the street, they do different types of projects. So their relative file sizes are going to be different from yours. So let's personalize this. Let's configure it so it's specific to you. And the whole idea with all of this is that this is saving us time. It's saving us time because I can understand what's happening inside my project to make the Revit file perform better. It's saving time by allowing me to go through and either schedule or manually kick off a task, and the Clarity system takes care of it for me. I'm not doing it. The Clarity system's doing it. And by this Clarity system taking on all those different things, it's returning my Fridays. If you've got the title of model coordinator, model manager, BIM manager, anything similar, how much time are you spending any given week, any given month, reviewing your files for quality? If we can have this Clarity system start spinning that data your direction on a regular basis, what's that do for your time? So instead of just hunting things down, you can be looking at the data, turning it into actionable information, and working with your colleagues to get things better instead of just spending all of that time trying to find the needle in the haystack. Clarity is going to be that big magnet finding the needle for you. Now you can use your human intelligence to figure out what's it mean, what are my next steps to get the firm working at a better place. And lastly, if you are that group that is working with data sheets or anything similar, whether we're looking at reports, which are more of the spreadsheet style appearances with with diagrams, key plans of the building, or if we're looking at data sheets. I've got a couple of different types of room data sheets, but what it really comes down to is to be able to say, here's a layout of showing me information about my particular building. Here's my multi-purpose space, room 100, and it's actual and programmed areas. So we're 70 feet over, 70 square feet over. What are its finishes based off the actual data in the room object? As we start getting into other things, how many power receptacles are in here? I'll tell you right now, those power receptacles, all 8 of them, came from the MEP file. So not only are we counting what's happening inside a given Revit file, but we're aggregating information from the collection of Revit files that makes up the project. And we're reading through that link barrier that Revit can't always handle, doesn't handle on its own. We can get past that because now we've aggregated that information inside SQL. So here's that room relative to the other rooms in that level of the building, other furniture, fixture, equipment, things that exist in this building that we need to care about. All of this is configurable. You can customize your data sheet to look like anything you want it to be. It's just a matter of figure out what that design is, and we can implement it inside this system and look for certain pieces of data, print out all of these into a booklet of data sheets about rooms, about equipment, mechanical equipment data sheets, lighting fixture data sheets. Whatever it might need to be, we can go ahead and pull that through here and let the Clarity system generate those things for you. So from a demo standpoint, those are some of the major types of things that we're looking at through here, but it turns around and says, well, what's it matter to me? If we've got those dozens upon dozens of different things that Clarity can do, what are the ones that I'm likely to use? What's the savings that I'm likely to see as we get moving through there? So for that, a couple things to be able to try and quantify what we're looking at. We mentioned before, we took a look at the data that our clients have been able to provide us and started aggregating that across all of the Clarity clients that we've got internationally. And here's our top 10, 1 through 10, of the tasks that are most commonly performed in Clarity across the globe. As I mentioned before, PDF's way up there at the top. Generate DWGs. I was surprised by how far down in the list that was. I was surprised by how high in the list publishing a Revit model was. So the idea of publishing a Revit model is, again, I referred to it before, but where we can say, let's say every Friday you need to send an updated model to other partners working on the job with you. Clarity can do that. You can set up a task that'll run every Friday at 10 p.m., every Saturday morning at 2 a.m., midnight, whatever time you need it to be. You can take your Revit file. As it goes through that Revit file, if you need to, purge it, delete views, delete sheets if you needed to, delete views not on sheets, compact the file, whatever. You do some basic cleanup of that file and then send it off to your design partners. And do that every Friday, so you don't have to worry about it. It's part of getting that Friday back in your life. Creating Navisworks files. Just generate the NWC file so that you can start going through other types of clash detection. The Revit database export goes back all to data sheets, to helping out with performing tasks. It's a core aspect of what is Revit. Model metrics is a growing field for Clarity that more and more of our clients are spending more time in it, because whatever you can do to improve the quality of your Revit files has, in my opinion, I don't have any factual data on this yet, but in my opinion, it's got a significant, a huge impact on what you've got going on and the performance of your team. If we take that whole idea of what happens if you're running into issues with model corruption, if I'm tracking all these metrics ahead of time, then that doesn't happen. We get away from that issue of model corruption. And what's the value of not having a corrupted file? Well, there's potentially days of time that are saved. And it's not just days of my time, it's days of everybody on the project team. So it goes up almost exponentially depending on what we're looking at. So all these different types of things are what we've got for the top 10. Now, what we had talked about in some of the advertising, we'll say, for this session here today is what can we do to get Clarity to save you 10 hours a month? That's easy. But how easy is it, and what's that mean to you? Well, I mean, 10 hours a month, that's what, 120 hours a year for you. That's what, 3 weeks a year? 3 weeks of time, that starts to add up, gets very significant. But how do we get there? How do we get to that 10 hours a month? And I decided, let's go super easy on this. Take those top 10 items. Forget everything else, just the top 10 items. We can get there really fast. And now these are estimates that I've got. Now there's a few different ways that we can crunch the numbers of what people are actually doing with Clarity. We'll talk about that shortly. But do you spend 30 minutes a week with your computer generating PDFs? Maybe not all on one day, but just 30 minutes a week generating PDFs. That's probably pretty easy to achieve or exceed on any given project. Publishing your Revit model, sending it to somebody else. Maybe it takes more than 20 minutes, but you only do it every other week. There's some flexibility in here in these numbers. Generating Navisworks files. It may not take 10 minutes, but let's say you need to generate the Navisworks file. When I'm talking about this, it's like, oh, I need to generate a Navisworks file for project stakeholder X. That means I need to go to my computer, launch Revit, wait for Revit to finish launching, open the Revit file, wait for the Revit file to finish opening, publish to NWC, wait for the publish to finish, then close out of the model. That entire process, beginning to end, it's pretty easily into that 10-minute range, depending on your files. There's all sorts of variables through here, but I don't think that these numbers are all that unrealistic. You might look at them and say, oh, they're half of that for me. That's fair. You might also look at them and say, I'd love it if my PDFs got done in half an hour. So this is trying to hit that middle ground. But if we do that, this is an easy 10 hours a week, and we're not even talking about all the features that Clarity has. And part of why I'm confident in being able to say that that's easily achievable is one of the ways that we looked at how clients are actually using the Clarity software is we also took an analysis of how long does the average task take? You know, not tying it back to a person, but just a task on a project. On average, how long does it take? And came back that it takes, I think it was like 7 minutes or something along those lines for the average task. Some will be a lot smaller, some will be bigger, but on average, 7 minutes. Okay, how often does that task run? Sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's weekly. There's a variable in there. So we took all those different types of variables, came back and say, hey, if you've got that Revit robot sitting off in the corner, we've got a total of IMAGINiT Clarity clients running globally that we're probably closer to 500 or 475 or something like that pretty easily now. But the last time we had the official numbers pulled, excuse me, over 460,000 hours have been saved by people using Clarity products. Now, if we take that around and break it down to the individual project, well, some projects are just going to be, a couple weeks, a month, a couple months, and then they're out. Some projects might even last more than a year. There's a big range. So if we took the average project being roughly 7 minutes, the average frequency that task gets run, and then annualize it, say, okay, well, let's say you've got a collection of projects. Maybe you have projects that last 2 months. And so let's take that around and say, well, great, well, let's take 6 projects then so we can roll it out over the course of a year. Maybe you've got one project that lasts a year, but let's annualize that. And when we annualize that, we were up to 284 hours per project annually. So if you have, again, averaging it out of saying I've got either 6 2-month projects or 2 6-month projects or one 1-year project, we're looking at it on an average 284 hours per annual project. And if we're looking at that of 284 hours per annual project, coming back and saying that we can give you 10 hours a month, that's pretty easy because that's only 120 hours. And we've got the data that says we can, on average, 284. So there's a big gap in there. Now let's pull that back though. Let's go for the easy bar to cover, the easy bar to cross. If we're looking at that, what would a typical firm look like? What does 10 hours mean to you? So I pulled a couple of different pieces of information, but according to 2018 AIA firm study, according to salary.com, we said on average, 80% of U.S. staff and architecture firms are 10 or more people. So let's just assume that. If you're an engineering firm, apologize for using AIA numbers. If you're an AIA firm, well, here you go. average salary for a CAD designer. There's higher salaries for architects and engineers. There's higher salaries based off of where you are in the country. There's all sorts of different things, but again, trying to grab some blank averages, and there's actual sources that this stuff came from. So average of 10 people, let's call them Revit users, just to make it easy on ourselves, and 60 grand annual salary. Your mileage may vary. This is sample data. So we take that, pull it off to the next piece. Say, great, if I'm doing all of that, again, 10 people, 60K, what's that go for here? 60,000 annually. If you've got your average budgeted working years, 2,080 hours, you've got vacation and other types of things that go in there, that works out to $28.85 an hour. $28.85 an hour, saving 10 hours per month, is $288.50 per person if we're working it this way. If I've got $288.50 per person and you've got 10 people in the firm, that's $2,800, almost $2,900 per month in savings that kind of gets rolled up into dollars. Now, is this going to be profit back to the company? Not necessarily, but it's that dollar value in value that you get back to the firm because you now have these 10 people saving 10 hours a month that are doing things that add value to the project instead of watching progress bars, that are maybe you're actually going home at the end of the day instead of working until midnight. There's all sorts of things that can come through here, plenty of ways that we can realize the benefits from that. That gets into an internal discussion of how are we going to make sure that we get that value out of this, but then turn that around and say, great, we'll turn that into $34,000 annually of effort that we can reclaim and turn back into making our projects better, making our people better, making all sorts of things better than it otherwise would have been. Now, what are some other ways that we can look at this? And if we say, great, I could save $34,000 a year, what's that mean to me? If I'm going to have to spend $100,000 to get clarity, this is no good. It's not even close to that. So representative numbers here. If we're talking about an ROI calculation, this is illustration purposes only. Your mileage may vary. Your mileage will vary. Let's get a personalized quote to you for what your actual costs are going to be. There's one cost for an annualized license of clarity. There's a perpetual license. There's all sorts of variables that fit into here that I'm not, and I'm intentionally not taking into account at this time. So can't stress that enough. This is example numbers. Contact IMAGINiT to get your numbers. So for our sample 10-person firm, 10-user firm that we're looking at, you can get a version of Clarity that would be as low as, we'll say, $7 grand for the first year, $4 grand for the second, third, fourth, and so on years. It's the annualized license. Year one benefit, year two benefit, they're all $34,620. That's the number we got from the previous page. So your return on investment, first year, 27 grand in value back to the company, just within that. I mean, if we look at this and we go back to the previous thing here for a minute, we were saying $2,800 per month, and we've got a software cost of roughly, we'll round up and say $8 grand. I mean, we've got that return on investment within 3 months, as soon as 3 months. Everything after that is gravy. So there's an intense ROI that can come out of here. And as you scale upward, if you say, well, that's a 10-person firm, I'm a 50-person firm, what's that mean for me? Well, you might have a little bit more from a cost from a software side, but you might also just say we can scale this up and run it however we need to, because we'll just take that and times 50, so now I've got $300,000. Okay, that's a little bit ludicrous to think of as far as a ROI number, but let's pare that down and see how can we scale this best, because the wider you can send this as a software within your firm, the more you can get out of it, the bigger of an ROI you can return back to your company. And it is, again, representative numbers for us to be able to look at in here. The licensing for Clarity is it's licensed to your server. So we don't care how many projects you put on it. We don't care how many people you attach to that server. You'll be providing the server. You'll be providing the machines that'll be running tasks. So there are some potential other costs through here. This is where we need to have that us and you conversation to make sure we've got those your actual costs set up for the way it needs to run. Physical, virtual, don't care. But it's incredibly scalable so that you can take this value and run with it to the greatest extent possible within your firm. This was an example off of a 10-person, a 10 Revit user type of firm. But we can take that and see where it can grow and become even more than it would have been before and return that time back to you. Get this ROI of 30 grand a year back into an investment into your projects to make your projects smoother, to make your projects better, to improve on your people, to improve on your colleagues. There's all these things that can return that time back to you, to get your Fridays back. I mean, what would that mean to you to not have to deal with all of this admin junk once a week, if that's the way that you're working, the way many of our clients work, the way I used to work? So I'm going to take this and open it up to whatever we might have for questions. Say thank you very much for the time that we've had for talking about clarity here, and let's talk a little bit deeper. Let's save you some time. Get that return back to your life.
One moment while I end today's recording.